Hello again, everyone, and welcome back to the Hockey Writers Fantasy Forecheck podcast. As always, I am your host, Jacob Strozyk. Joining me today, I have a guest. If you'd like to introduce yourself.
Matthew Zator, you've probably seen me on many shows if you've watched a lot of these YouTube shows on the channel. I'm around. I'm also an emergency sub for any of the shows, so happy to be here.
Billington, unfortunately, has some technical difficulties, so Matt's going to fill in, but that's all right. We're all fantasy owners here, and that's what's really important, and that's what keeps everything fun. So before we dip into everything else, let's start with our question of the week. For this one, do you try to address your concerns with your team by moving pieces early, or do you prefer to more let them play out and see how things go a little bit later down the run?
I like waiting. Early on you can panic and move guys, and then all of a sudden they bounce back, and you're like, "Oh, why did I get rid of them so soon?" I've done both. I've done both in my fantasy hockey career. I've done it where I've panicked and all the guys not doing well, get rid of him, and then he starts doing well, and like, oh come on, why didn't I just keep him? And then I've done the other way where I've waited too long, and there could have brought someone else in, and yeah, I mean I most of the time like to wait on guys and to see if they can figure it out, because sometimes it's just slow starts. There are players that just never start seasons well, and then halfway through the month all of a sudden they're starting to figure it out. I don't know why that is with certain players. I know way back Roberto Luongo was always notorious for being really bad in the first couple months of the season, and then all of a sudden you just rebound to be the elite goaltender he always is. So if you got panicked and dropped him after the first month, you'd be kicking yourself. So yeah.
Well, I asked mostly because I've been watching waiver wires in both of the leagues that I'm in, and it's just activity after activity after activity,
Yeah.
and people are picking up and dropping players left and right. And I'm just sitting there going, it's 2 games.
Yeah.
It's 3 games. I don't think anybody's played more than 3 games so far. So I'm like, why is nobody like just being patient and staying put? But, some people apparently really like to just try and address their concerns early and go for what might be hot. And
Mm-hmm.
that's completely okay. Sometimes you got to run your team that way if you don't really have much going on as far as what you would otherwise be consistent with. But me personally, I'm in your boat. I'm more of a wait and see type guy. Granted, I also did pretty well this past week, so I'm more inclined to sit back and wait with the players that I have. But that's just a personal preference. There's always situations where you can do both. I didn't check. How did you do this past week?
I did not win my first week.
What was your
I
score?
I was ahead at a certain part of the week. I was ahead by 2, and then ended up losing pretty bad. But also one of my starters has an illness. Merzlikins is out, not injured, but he hasn't been playing. But he has started good on the season, so I'm hopeful that when he comes back, he'll continue. So.
Yeah, I had a bit of a goaltending flop problem with Stuart Skinner as he got lit up over this past week. So thankfully, my opponent did not really have much luck in their goaltending category either. So I won those. So I'll take it, but I would prefer if Vancouver would stop scoring on Edmonton when I'm starting Stuart Skinner. It's just what it is. Speaking
it,
of Edmonton,
Yeah, yeah. It was very unexpected the Canucks were able to do that. I mean, Boeser with 4 goals. We'll talk about him, I'm sure. Yeah, it was a really weird couple games. I mean, I don't think it was luck. I think the Canucks played a really good game. Wasn't
no,
lucky
you're
that they
right.
did it, but yeah, it wasn't expected. That's for sure.
No, I don't think it was luck. I just think it was Edmonton's defense was really shown as to how bad it still is and how they need to
Yeah.
fix it. But while we're on the topic of the Canucks and people that score goals, you mentioned Brock Boeser. He's at the top of my players that I feel can go up or down, but you still might want to pick them up if they're on your waiver wire list. I know that's a really long mouthful, but in general, these are the players that you should be looking to pick up or maybe should not if I think that they're going to kind of fizzle out. Boeser is on my pickup list. Obviously, 4 goals is something worth noting, but it's not just the fact that he scored the 4 goals. If you watch the game or if you watch the highlights, if you like watching all the highlights, it's the way that he did it. It wasn't the same goal every time. It wasn't just a tap in. It wasn't fluky stuff. It was some good goals, and it was great to see that out of him. And I think that's worth grabbing in your fantasy leagues because if he's still playing at that level, he's going to be putting up points.
Boeser, like, yeah, I agree. I mean, the thing is it wasn't, there was one goal that was a lucky one where it bounced in off him, but he was in a good position in front of the net. And, sometimes that happens. And yeah, a couple of the goals were pure. I mean, one of them was pure Brock Boeser. He has such a great shot and haven't seen it consistently over the last couple seasons, but that one goal he scored was, I believe it was his first one, was a Boeser type shot that we saw back in his rookie season. So if he can do that a little more consistently this season, he's a 30-goal scorer. I mean, that's definitely, he's on the top power play unit with Pedersen and Hughes and all the main big guns there. So he'll have his opportunities. I think this season he'll stay on that top power play unit because Horvat's not there anymore. So because he was stuck on the second unit last season. So I'm thinking he won't be doing 4 goals a game. Don't expect that.
No, definitely
not.
But
I mean, I think he'll score a lot more consistently this season. He had a really good game and didn't score in his second game, but got an assist on a slap shot. It was tipped in, I believe. And so, yeah, it was tipped in by Hoglander. Mm-hmm. So he's got points in the first 2 games here. So 5 points in 2 games. Pretty good production so far.
Well, yeah, well, the thing that I like is it looks like there's a little bit of a turning of the page, but one thing that kind of stands out is he's somebody that can be that kind of secondary scorer and a complement to your regular scoring players. And if you have a salary cap on your league, he doesn't cost that much. He's right around $6 million. So it's not going to break the bank if you're going to pick him up off waivers and someone that's going to get you goals. Goals are always worth something, both in fantasy in a category and in points league. So Boeser is a hot pickup for me. On the flip side, I'm going to talk about Nick Paul. Had a great first start, but since then, 0 points and his ice time declined. So I'm going to say Nick Paul is more of a be wary about the pickup. Don't assume that he's going to put up 3 points a game because that's not likely. He'll chip in a couple here and there, and depending on what value your league places on peripherals, he might get you a little extra there. But he's leave him on the waiver wire unless you really need something and you're kind of fishing for a potential for some potential extra points. But he's not going to be a primary scorer for you, and I wouldn't pick him up personally.
I mean, with Paul, he's a bit of I don't know if he's a bit of a streaky scorer. I mean, it's sometimes good in fantasy to have guys that can do that and get on a hot streak and help you out. But, he's, like you said, he did start off really well. But, with a team like the Tampa Bay Lightning where, these guys can move all around the lineup, like Paul's one of those guys. He doesn't always play in the top 6. He bumped down to the bottom 6 sometimes because he can play all over the place. Again, that can be good sometimes, but it's not always something that is indicative for production, which you want in fantasy. So good start, but I don't know if it's sustainable, like you said, for long term. And I probably wouldn't drop him at this point, but again, I'm one of those guys that want to wait a bit. But I'd be wary to pick him up if you don't have him right now.
Right. I'm not saying drop him if you have him. I'm saying if you have the option to pick him up off of a waiver wire or go and pick somebody else that I'm going to talk about, I'd favor one of these other ones. Speaking of hot streaks, I want to talk about somebody who might have a bit of a hot streak based off of their recent performance. I want to talk about Frank Vatrano. Big hat trick, big hat trick the other night. And I think that's worth noting considering he also is averaging a little over 20 minutes of ice time. So he's playing big minutes. He's going to be given more opportunities to score on a Ducks team that doesn't necessarily have all the firepower that you would assume otherwise. But somebody's got to score. And it looks like right now he might be one. Don't know if he'll do it consistently throughout the year, but I think he's good for a little hot streak to start the year, and I'd say pick him up now before somebody else thinks about it.
Yeah, and with guys like that, they get on a bit of a confident. They're confident, and you may get a few more goals out of him. And of course, I think he probably will be playing higher in the lineup for a bit too, as long as he's playing well. So definitely has a chance to keep that going.
Yeah, I think I've always liked him just as a good role player, but it's interesting to see what he can do with some top 6 minutes.
Yeah.
Speaking of players who do a lot with top 6 minutes, I want to talk about Evan Rodrigues. For some reason, this guy just continues to impress me every single year as a sleeper pick. You don't pick up on him, but when he's put in top 6 positions and in a position to be a productive player, he does it, and he does it well. So I like what Florida is doing with him. He's got a decent average of ice time, and he's producing at a fairly consistent rate. So for people who aren't paying attention to Rodrigues, he's definitely a pick up and hold on to candidate, because I think he's a really good depth option as opposed to a pick up, drop type guy.
Yeah, he always surprises me throughout every season. He gets picked up by these teams, and all of a sudden you look at him at the end of the season, he's got decent numbers. Why do you think he has a job every season? So I think I agree. He's probably someone you don't just pick up for the short term. He could be a long-term piece. So, I mean, if he is on the waivers, I don't know how many leagues he would be. Maybe because he is flying under the radar from the other big guys. I think he definitely is a good pickup at this point.
I'm surprised nobody gave him a little bit more of a long-term deal, but hey, as far as fantasy is concerned, if he wants to keep producing in my depth roles, I'm a very happy man to keep picking him up and using him. Let's go to someone who's a little bit of a bigger name and has been moving around a little bit. John Klingberg. He's getting a great opportunity in Toronto. He's playing top minutes, and he's playing with a defensive defenseman in Jake McCabe, which I think will allow him to play the style that he is good at, and that will get something closer to what he was doing in Dallas. I'm not sure if we're going to get to those, high numbers, but I think he's going to be much better than he was last season. And he's somebody that I would pick up and definitely hold on to, considering the role he's playing. He might even overtake Morgan Rielly as far as points for defensemen on the Leafs is concerned with the way that he plays. So I place a lot of stock in Klingberg right now.
He's also playing on the top power play unit, I believe, as well.
Yep.
Which is a pretty good spot to be in. On that Maple Leafs team, that's for sure.
There's a couple of good guys that he can feed the puck to on that power play. Just a couple of no names. I mean, just never heard of them. All right, let's go to somebody that I personally really like, and that's Mangiapane for the Flames. He, for some reason, also flies not necessarily as much as Rodrigues, but he flies a little bit under the radar because he had a bit of a down year last year, as most of the Flames players did, but he's still a fairly consistent and good scoring player. He's not a 40-goal scorer by any means, but he's a good 25, and he could probably hit 30 goals if he's put into the right positions, and he's playing top minutes right now. And he's playing with Huberdeau, which is one of my breakout candidates for this year as far as fantasy is concerned, and I think that's going to make a huge difference. So I like his pairing, I like his position, I like his scoring touch, and I really think if Mangiapane for some reason isn't on your waiver wire, he might be a good buy low trade pick at this point too.
Yeah, he's in a good position in that top 6, top line, I believe. Top line in on the Flames. So if he can return to that, I believe he scored 30 goals not that long ago, and he could be a guy that I don't know, like waivers. Some leagues may have already have him on teams, but he is a definite kind of, like you said, maybe not under the radar, but has the opportunity to produce.
And then I'm going to talk about probably my favorite player I have on this list, Big Bad Boone Jenner. Now, it's been a joke in my internal friends and everybody else amongst my fantasy leagues, because the one year I picked up Boone Jenner, just with a really low pick, not expecting a whole lot out of him. And I made a big deal about him being the savior of my team. And lo and behold, he ended up being the reason my team won that year and actually was the savior of my team. So I'm happy to see Boone Jenner doing Boone Jenner things once again. Big hat trick, big scoring, and not to mention his face-off percentage is ridiculous. So if you have a league that values face-offs and centers like that, Jenner is somebody that I would absolutely make a move for. Not just, I don't think he's anywhere on waivers at this point. You don't put up what he did and still be on waivers at this point. But I would definitely make a move for him if you have the opportunity to, because I think Columbus is still going to be a solid team. And I think Jenner is going to continue to do what he does, not necessarily score 3 goals a game, but he's going to win draws. He's going to score at a decent pace. And it's going to be worth your while as like a number 2 or even a number 3 center, depending on how deep your team is. But he could be a very valuable number 2.
Yeah, he's also, he adds a hit factor too, because he's physicality as well. So he's a multi-category guy, and that's valuable. And he's, like you said, he's probably not anywhere available to just pick up for free, but definitely a guy you want to target to kind of, if he's available from any other teams, because he definitely would add a lot to your lineup for sure.
If you don't want to trade players, he's definitely someone you might want to trade a draft pick for and really kind of bolster your team if you're in a kind of a win now mode as opposed to a selling mode and a tanking mode, which some people feel like they need to tank right at the start of the year, and that's perfectly okay. I've done it before and it paid off. So it's just a matter of how you feel your team is formatted. But if you're a winning buy now team, Jenner is somebody I highly recommend picking up. Now, let's dip into just a couple of teams that I feel like had a bit of a slow start off the bat, and I want to emphasize, don't panic, because there's a lot of potential still there, and it's not a reason to sell just because they had a slow start. And the 2 teams for me that come to mind are Buffalo and Edmonton. If you want to disagree, you're welcome to.
I agree. Those 2 teams, I definitely Edmonton. I didn't expect them to lose, especially the 8-1 game against the Canucks. The second game was a much closer, but they still ultimately lost and didn't get any points from that. So, and they're, like you already mentioned, the goaltending is already in the tank for a lot of, for fantasy owners that had Stuart Skinner or Jack Campbell. And I'm sure both of them were picked up in a lot of leagues, especially how Campbell played in the preseason. So, I mean, that's definitely disappointment. And Buffalo, same thing. I mean, they haven't been very good this season so far. You got Devin Levi hasn't been that good. It's quite a few goals as well. So, I mean, the goaltending hasn't been good for both teams. But yeah, I do agree. I don't think you should panic yet because it's only a few games. Lots of opportunity to bounce back, but it definitely is disappointing to see these 2 teams already off to a slow start.
Yeah, both of them kind of function off of this I can outscore my problems mentality. And when you're not getting that type of goal support, Buffalo's top line has nothing. Buffalo's second line has nothing. They've been carried by Jordan Greenway, of all people, so far as their scoring is concerned. And, maybe he's somebody that might be worth looking at this point if he continues to produce the way he is. But overall, the Top Guns in Buffalo aren't doing anything. Top Guns in Edmonton are trying to do something, but they're not doing nearly enough to compensate for the goals that are going in their net as opposed to the ones that they're putting in the net. So I say don't panic. They're both still offensively charged teams. Things will fall into place and everything will kind of round itself out and everything will be okay in the hockey world again when McDavid is scoring 3 points a game. But it's not the time to start dropping and trading. It's the time to just hold, be patient, and let it settle. Things will balance out. It'll be okay. On the flip side, teams that I feel are ridiculously hot based off of how their players are playing and just how the team is playing as a whole. Up first is Vegas Golden Knights. Adin Hill is playing out of his mind. He's doing a lot of things that he was doing in the playoffs, and he's playing obscenely well. And Vegas is scoring a bunch of goals, which is helping him. So they're 3-0. I like what Vegas is doing. Give me your take on them.
And I'm glad I dropped Logan Thompson because it looks like Adin Hill's going to get get quite a few starts. Peter Mrazek's my guy now. He's been okay so far since I picked him up. But yeah, I do agree. I mean, Vegas is sure off to that great start, coming off, doesn't look like a Stanley Cup hangover or whatever it is. But yeah, 3-0, great start for the goaltender that everyone was kind of iffy on if he was going to able to do the same thing. But so far, so good.
Yeah, I like what he's doing from that perspective. Then the second team I want to jump into, we kind of already talked about, was the Maple Leafs. Again, another really hot offensive start. So if you have any of the offensive players on the Leafs, definitely a team to continue to start. There's probably not too many waiver pickups or anything that you're going to be making for those types of players. But if you're looking for a start versus sit type situation, definitely start your Leafs players as opposed to sitting really any of them, especially if you have like Tavares, Nylander, Marner. And then there's Austin Matthews, who decided to score 2 straight hat tricks in the only 2 games that they played. So if you have Austin Matthews, applause to you for feeling strong in your picks. And if you chose him very, very high in your fantasy draft, you're reaping the rewards, as am I in my one league. So sometimes that's just the way it is.
Yeah, it looks
you're not
like
going
he's
to go
not
run play Matthews.
Doesn't look like he's getting a hat trick in this one as it's going on right now. They're losing 3-1 to the Blackhawks, and he has not scored a goal. So
there's always time.
Minute 25 left in the game. So unless he's gone crazy. But yeah, he has gotten up to a great start, like 6 goals in 2 games. It's insane. And so, yeah, he'll continue scoring. I mean, if he doesn't score in this game so far, but he'll definitely keep going. It seems like he's on. I mean, how many did he have last year? Most it was a down year, 40 goals. But I think this year he gets back to his 50, 60 goals. So, yeah. I mean, yeah, definitely off to that good start, and keep going with the Maple Leafs players. I mean, they're going to keep scoring, even though they only have 1 goal in the game today.
Yeah, the Leafs will be a top contending team in the Atlantic. So I rarely ever say drop your Leafs players or don't play your Leafs players. They're always a start versus sit.
Oh yeah,
it's just the way it's going to be for a while, and that's how you got to read it. But that's really about it that we have for this show. Thank you again, everybody, for tuning into this episode of Fantasy Forecheck. On the next show, we're just going to continue to look at the fantasy trends for the week. If you guys have any questions, feel free to drop us comments or questions, and we'll be happy to answer them. If you want to tweet at us, I am on Twitter at Stro67. If you want to tweet at Matt, you could probably do that too.
You go on tweet at me. Yeah, I'm Matthew Zator SC on X, and that's the best place to find me if you want to tweet about anything related to fantasy, Canucks, prospects, whatever you want.
And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast itself on your preferred listening channel, and to the Hockey Writers podcast and YouTube pages, where you can find anything and everything else hockey related. Thanks again, everybody, for tuning in, and we will see you next week.